So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Dr. Simon Weitzman, going into the first principle of groundedness and open-hearted presence. And Dr. Simon Weitzman is the chairperson of the Institute for Mindfulness in South Africa. Over to you, Simon.
Thanks, Dina. Thanks, Casper. And hi, everybody. Last week, for those of you on the forum, I launched into Neuroanatomy 101, which I'm sure was a riveting listen. And many of you might be delighted to hear I'm not going to do that today. All I'm going to say is that for most of us at the moment, our nervous systems are very nervous. And so that is both individually, whether we are aware of this or not, and collectively, given the rate of change and the degree of uncertainty, and also the tremendous amount of loss and fear that's pervading all communities. So the intention with our brief mindfulness practice, which is what I'm going to be inviting an exploration of in the next few minutes, is to create an environment within ourselves and in this collective of everybody online at the moment, in which the nervous system can just be a little bit less nervous, to actually regulate the nervous system back towards its baseline, which is more open-hearted, more embodied and grounded. So for some of you, mindfulness might be a new practice. For some of you, it might be familiar, and it really doesn't matter. So everybody has the capacity to pay attention. Everybody has a body, and everybody has a breath. And those are the core ingredients. So to begin with, you can practice just for a few minutes now as our guide with your eyes open and staring a little bit away with a light gaze away from the screen. Or you can close your eyes if that's comfortable for you. But really following your own sense of what is comfortable. Don't create more unnecessary strain. So settling in for just a few minutes, and we're going to take these minutes moment by moment, which is to say we're going to invite this quality of presencing, of being where we are as best as we can. And perhaps we can begin by just taking note of our posture, the way that the physical body is sitting in this particular configuration. And take your attention, if you can, all the way down to the bottom of your feet, where they are in contact with the ground. And just noticing the subtle pressure between the feet and the floor, the ground beneath you, this plane of contact. There's nothing dramatic about it. It's just noticing there is ground beneath me that I can feel and sense in this moment. Bringing attention to your buttocks on the chair or on the cushion, wherever you're sitting, and noticing the pressure of the upper body coming down through the spine onto the sitting bones and the buttock muscles, and the way this feels in contact with the surface beneath you, grounding through the sitting. And let your body sink without losing the tone of your back. Just let it be held by the ground and the chair. Just noticing this. It's a subtle shift in allowing the grounding to happen through the body. And perhaps noticing if your shoulders are closer to your ears than they need to be, softening the shoulders down towards the ground. And tucking the chin very slightly in towards the chest, releasing the unnecessary strain in the neck muscles. And to regulate the nervous system, we're just going to spend a very short period of time pacing the breath. So beginning to breathe slightly deeper than normal in through the nose. And then breathing out long and slow through the mouth with a soft throat. What long and slow is that we have the same amount of breath exhaled in a longer period of time. So breathing in through the nose, the nostrils, noticing or being aware of the sensations within the nose. And then with a soft throat and an open mouth, breathing out softly, long and slow. Almost see if you can follow the sensation of the out-breath into the body, and noticing this subtle quality of softening and of dropping into the body, down into the groundedness of this particular posture as you follow the out-breath. And not to worry at all if you find that the mind is too busy to even begin to do that, or that you get pulled into the incessant movement of the mind thinking about this and that. If you do happen to notice this, can you experiment with just bringing your attention back to breathing for a second? And breathing in this way and seeing what effect it has in through the nostrils. And then a slow, long exhale through the mouth into the body. And now, if you will, just for a few seconds, becoming aware of sounds around you, sounds in front of you, sounds behind you, sounds to your left, sounds to the right of you, sounds above you, sounds below you. Whatever sounds are moving through the soundscape, just letting them fall into the awareness that is already here. Nothing to seek, just the sounds, the simple sounds moving through. Grounded in the body, the breath centering us, the sounds rising and falling, moving through. And as and when you feel ready, if your eyes aren't already open, to open them slowly and bringing attention back to the screen. And to extend this practice of listening to sound, we're now going to begin to tune into sounds of the human voice in all its diversity, different tones and qualities. So attending to the sound of the human voice just in the way that you've been attending to the body, the breath, and the sounds around you.
Thank you, Simon. Simon previously said on a podcast is that our bodies are not immune to the virus. We've all found that out. The world found that out. Neither is the space between our ears, our headspace. And so we're really consciously trying to make this session not just another Zoom session, just not another virtual session. We asked Simon to help us create some space in our bodies so we can do quality listening. And Simon, thank you for that, because we are going to need that quality attention. So I'm going to cast this web wide, and I'm going to go out into Russia, into Paris. And Eric, I think Eric Eberhardsen is hopefully on the call. And Eric, if it's your turn to speak, if you can just unmute yourself. But Eric is a founder and executive chairman of Ferro Nordic machines, and they are like the authorized dealer of Volvo. So he's kind of in a way Mr. Volvo. And Eric lives between Moscow and he lives between Paris. Eric, can you just maybe share with us some aspects that's happening in your world? If hopefully you are on this call.
Yes, I'm happy to be on the call, Casper, and it was a great start, Simon. Thank you for that. Happy to meet you all by Zoom. I think it's quite amazing how we swiftly have moved into this way of communicating and adopting to that. I'm actually sitting in Stockholm with my colleagues in Moscow. We needed to make a decision where to where to put ourselves in a situation with a lockdown, with a company which has business in Sweden, Germany, Russia, Kazakhstan, East Africa, other places in Europe. We just needed to make quick decisions on based on the likelihood of complete lockdowns. What is happening in Moscow, which I'm following perhaps on most closely at the moment, is very much following a Chinese strategy for a lockdown of the city, with the QR codes being distributed and using CCTV to follow people's movement. Hopefully with an aim to enable people to get back into some kind of movement after a period of mitigation and suppression. But it also that is a part of the world that does not have how to say the best credentials for open society and democracy. I think we're there. That's not the only place where we see the big state rolling in and taking over from taking the. We are scared that there is taking the opportunity to limit people's freedom. In the name of health now, but I can't say that everyone trusts that this is not with a thought of keeping it like that for a long time. Specifically, Russia is is very early in the phase. They had made some early measures to stop them or to limit the spread with a closed border to China. Of course, impossible with such a big country to limit to make isolated measures in a way that other countries perhaps can. But also a tradition of not perhaps being a little bit ruthless about people's lives and the actual necessity for people to keep a job might lead to a strategy that is now where lockdown is actually followed by as soon as possible a move back towards as normal a working life as possible. And then that doesn't mean that the social distancing will be going on for quite some time.
Eric, so I'm just going to quickly interrupt you there because we also have time things. But 2 weeks ago I spoke to you. You said to me, Casper, the oil crisis is much bigger for us right now as the virus. Has that changed? Is the virus issue bigger than the oil crisis for you at the moment?
I would say that the consequences seen in businesses are very different from sector to sector. In the B2B industrial sector, of course, the oil price is having an immediate effect on the strength of the ruble and the ability for companies to get to everything from importation to financing, whereas you have the retail sector, which now is mostly affected by social distancing.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Thank you so much for spending some of your time. And again, we will send feedback to everybody about this session and maybe tips from different places. Thank you for joining us. And we're going to go back to Europe, but I want to bring us just in close home to South Africa. We're all locked down in our houses. We're stuck in a house if we're privileged. a lot of people are not privileged enough to be stuck in a house, but somebody who knows houses very well. Andrew Golding, we've got you on the line. If you can just maybe, from your perspective, Andrew Golding is the CEO of Pam Golding Properties, one of the leading international estate agency company. What's happening in your world, and what might be one or two tips? And please, there's about I'm very sorry, only about 2 minutes time available, but please share with us.
Thanks, Casper. Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you. Yeah, so up until Monday, we had a business which was 300 offices, 15 different countries, 3,000 people, all engaging with each other in their homes and offering a sort of comprehensive property services business. And we've had to consider the prospects of that business just being completely overhauled and potentially obliterated, and are now trying to find ways of essentially reconfiguring the entire property engagement transaction in a contactless and virtual environment. So many hours of Zoom meetings and trying to figure out how to essentially reconfigure this. We certainly believe that from a South African perspective, the prospect of a kind of normal property transaction as we used to understand it a week ago is not a realistic prospect, and therefore on the presumption that people are going to still continue to transact in some way, whether that's buying and selling or renting, then we need to provide a service that enables people to do that, which is safe and which enables them to move essentially on the presumption that they are going to move once this lockdown starts to be released. And so that is really just about taking each component of the property transaction from the initial contact with what used to be a physical contact with an estate agent or some other property service provider, all the way through to the secure transfer of title in a way that is safe and secure from a legal perspective. So just massive challenges, and it's been extraordinary in terms of my own organization, how a company that was dispersed over 300 offices has come together, and where this medium is enabling people to work in a way which ironically seems more cohesive than it did before the virus. So that has been I suppose, a positive outcome, but it's still early days, and huge challenges lie ahead for us. In particular, from an earnings perspective, most of the industry is commission-based. And so from a South African perspective, you've got 50,000 estate agents who are unable to receive the money that they would have earned from the transactions they've done, and the prospects of concluding any future transactions in the immediate short term are zero. Oh. So hopefully that's under 2 minutes, but that's my 2 cents worth.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you so much. And moving from a house that we all can maybe live in if we're privileged, to a house or a big building where many people might end up, as we know, as a hospital. And we've got Lizanne Himon here. She's a director of Netcare. Netcare is one of the huge private service providers in South Africa, and they've now also launched a way of serving or giving help to everybody in South Africa. And Lizanne is caught between two worlds, because she's in board of Netcare, and on the other side, she's one of the founders and startup founders or shareholders of a new bank called Bank Zero. Lizanne, some insights for us. What is working for you? What have you done? Can you please share with us?
Sure. I must say, this has been a harrowing and yet inspiring experience for me. So you're right. On the one hand, we, in this digital bank, I've always tried to explain to people what it means to be an exponential organization. Now everybody understands exponentialism perfectly. So we only have 22 people in the bank. So there we are small and nimble and make quick decisions. And then on the other hand, I see this beautiful hospital, that's the group that's the largest in South Africa, and that's taking huge leadership in this crisis. And what I'm picking up is that the lessons remain the same, no matter what side of the spectrum you sit. And one of them is that you have to really take harsh decisions with a big warm heart very, very quickly. So on the digital bank side, even before our president announced the lockdown, we said to all our people, work from home. We don't want you to get sick. We're only 22 people, one person falls ill, and that's the bank down. So that's a critical decision on that side. And then you see Netcare, who before the lockdown was announced already said no visitors allowed into the hospitals. Now those are harsh decisions when you have somebody lying in ICU and you're not allowed to go and visit other than newborn babies. So the one principle we followed on both sides is when you think you need to take a decision, it's already too late. So the moment you start thinking about, should we do this with our staff, or should we cut salaries, or should we do that, you need to take that immediately. You can't debate it for another few days. So that was the one big learning. And I think the other one for me is that if a company has purpose, then you can get through this. Because what I've seen on both sides is, on the hospital side, it's all about keeping patients in safe hands and making sure the families are okay, and making sure that they can continue to service the country. For example, making the decision to treat all public service patients at no cost, not taking a single cent profit in order to help the whole country. So for me, it's all about understanding what your purpose is, whether it is bringing digital banking that's accessible and cheap to all, whether it's helping people. For me, those are the two massive learnings I've seen.
Thank you, Lizanne. And Lizanne has just brought in that there's a small business, or well, soon to be hopefully a big business, but feedback we got from our last session, it's possible for Nedbank or for Absa or for Discovery to go faster in their strategies, and they've got time. But for entrepreneurs, you've got 1 week or 2 weeks and it's all wiped out. So I want to bring in that voice, because I think personally that if we get corporate South Africa and entrepreneurs, we need to communicate with each other to survive this in the long run. So I've got Nyosi Tshabalala, Sim Tshabalala, the ex-CEO of Standard Bank, happens to be his brother. Nyosi, just 1 or 2 minutes, what's happening on ground level? If you can just share with us, please. And I hope you are on this call. I think I saw Nyosi somewhere. Nyosi, are you there? Can you hear me? So like a typical radio station, I've got backup. So I've also got Mimi Kalinda. So Mimi is the group CEO and co-founder of African Communications Media, and she does wonderful work with storytelling, leadership, specifically with the Obama Foundation. Mimi, can you maybe share with us what's happening in your world?
Absolutely. Thank you, Casper. And hi, everyone. Nice to see you. So the work that we do in communications and public relations really helps our clients understand, well, first before a crisis, during a crisis, and post a crisis, how to communicate to their various stakeholder groups. And this crisis in particular has really brought to the forefront the fact that crises will happen. And so being in a position where, from a communication standpoint, you have prepared and scenario planned for that eventuality has become even more clear to our clients. But the one thing we keep talking about is messaging. And, you know, and if you follow all of the stuff that's been coming through on the news, if you're a member of a number of WhatsApp groups, etc., messaging can really, you know, either make or kill a brand in a moment of crisis. So, you know, really having clear, concise, and consistent messaging across the board has been something that we've been recommending. And also not being afraid to communicate, even as you're busy putting together a more robust communications plan, just making sure that you're staying on people's radar and really communicating consistently. The other thing that we found that's been quite interesting over the last couple of weeks is language. I don't know if you remember that quote by Nelson Mandela, where he says, you know, that if you speak to people in their own language, you know, you really tug at their heart. And a lot of the communications we've been seeing specifically in Africa has been in either English or French or Portuguese, and we're leaving out a huge amount of the population and stakeholders and audiences that we want to talk to, because we're not talking to them in a language that they can understand. So we're currently working on a project with the World Health Organization where we can translate some of the communication that's coming out into indigenous languages so that people can really not feel left out of what's happening. also, I think in terms from a thought leadership point of view, I think that this is a great time to actually pick your space. It doesn't have to be about just COVID-19, but what are you passionate about as a brand? Are you talking about women who are going to be one of the groups that are most affected by this crisis, especially women, households that are led by women? Youth, are you talking about mental health, which is obviously going to be a huge problem here as well? Digitizing education. So perhaps as a brand, starting to think about where do you want to position yourself? What space, conversational space, do you want to start owning for yourself? And the very last thing, I think, one of our clients is Ethiopian Airlines. And I think that, you know, you remember that they had a crash a couple of months ago, which was horrifying. But I think vulnerability as a brand and humanizing your brand is also extremely important. You know, sometimes as corporates, we want to, you know, we want to put together, we want to kind of be in this bubble of corporateness. I can't find the right term to express it necessarily, but I think that a brand that is human, that is relatable, and one that is consistent in its humanity is one that people can relate to. I think Ethiopian Airlines has really shown that both in their previous crisis and now. And those are the 4 thoughts I think I'd bring to the forefront, sticking to Casper's 2 minutes exactly.
Mimi, thank you so much, and lovely to see you. I also want to just bring in a voice because we got that feedback, and Ian Solomon, I see he's on it. Ian is a friend and a very successful entrepreneur, one of the suppliers to Woolworths, and I mean, some of you might have used their salt. It's Oryx. We're not advertising here, but Oryx salt. And Ian, maybe just, I mean, in 1 minute, what is the message from entrepreneurs, from people with medium, small businesses to our institutions, to our banks? What is a kind of a plea that you would like to maybe share to those entities, the big corporates? Hi, Ian, can you hear me? You can just unmute yourself and then speak. Let's see if Ian, it doesn't look like Ian can hear me. So the voice, I'll just share that voice from what Ian shared with me, and that is that it's 2 weeks, it's 3 weeks. We need communication. We need to hear from institutions, from insurance companies, from finance companies, and what needs to happen next, even if they do not necessarily have the money, but at least tell us if you are busy working on something. So at the moment, and I think it's part of a trauma, all companies are focused necessarily on communication within, not necessarily of cross-industry collaboration. So that was, I hope, more or less Ian's voice to this space. So Sonia Blichnout is a colleague, and I've learned so much about Sonia. If somebody understands complex adaptive systems, and she's trained as a meteorologist, I think, and some of you might know the Cynefin model, and some of you have read maybe some of her blogs. One of them, it's very hard to survive in the jungle if you were trained in the zoo. Sonia, please help us make sense. Are we in the jungle? Are we being hijacked? What's happening from a systems perspective?
Thanks, Casper. I'm not really particularly sure where we are at the moment. I think, as with most of the other people probably on the call, I think there's a big part, or many of us are simply in a state of confusion, trying to make sense and figure out what's going on. For those of you who are familiar with the Cynefin framework, there's this central domain of disorder or confusion, where we actually don't really understand what kind of a system or what kind of a problem we're dealing with. And a lot of the work that we're doing right now is to see, can we come up with really practical strategies for people to just be able to make sense and maintain forwards momentum. And I think I want to just pick up on some of the things that I heard in the conversations up to now that I just wanted to reflect on. And I think one is this notion of context. So I think, Casper, you mentioned that, you know, we're all self-isolating, we're all at home, and that is very much a position of privilege. And personally, I've just become so aware that there in this particular context, there is no one-size-fits-all solution. And we can learn from other countries and we can learn from each other, but I think we really need to honor the local context and to find our own emergent ways forward. So coming back to the jungle and the zoo, I think in a zoo, things are quite homogeneous and they're easy to manage. In the jungle, we need to honor the local context. And so I think, in a way, trusting our guts and trusting the local wisdom as well is becoming more and more important. Those who are closest to these problems are the ones who probably have the wisdom that we need to determine how to move forward. So that was the one. And then the word normal came up quite a lot, especially in the earlier conversations. And I've been personally reflecting on this idea of normal. So many of my clients are asking, for example, what do they need to do now from a business continuity perspective? And how do we get back to some kind of normality? And I think it's from a language perspective, just also thinking about language. I think what we're experiencing now is many of the fundamentals are being shaken, the fundamentals that we've built our businesses on, the fundamentals of market dynamics, all of these. But I think even deeper than that, some of our very deeply held narratives are being shaken and and I think we need to be open to questioning those. So so what is normal? I think we come out of a couple of decades where we felt that stability, predictability, certainty, order, all of these things are normal. And whenever we go into a place of unpredictability or uncertainty, that needs to be temporary. And something needs to happen just to bring us back to stability, predictability, and certainty, because that is normal. And I think those narratives are being challenged now as they never have before, because I don't think that we are going back to the normal that we think we are going back to. And I think we need to make peace with ambiguity, volatility, uncertainty. I think we've all just been dumped into a lot of ambiguity. And so I think if that is where we are, and the normal response to this is anxiety, what then do we need to do as leaders, and also to ensure that we maintain momentum? Because I think, as Lizanne said rightly, we can't afford now to dither and to lose momentum. And we also, to an extent, cannot afford to have centralized decision-making. We need to be empowering people, even right at the front lines of our organizations, to make decisions. And I think I want to wrap up with this in terms of just getting really practical. What do we need to do? And I think one is we need to be in a continuous state of situational awareness. So we need to orient ourselves. Where are we in this ever-shifting context? And we need to understand that that is a continuous process. So we need feedback loops in place. We need to really take a very honest look in the mirror and see, where are we now? What is possible from where we are? Then we need to set very clear direction. And this links to the importance of purpose. I think people now need a sense of direction. Even if we can say as leaders, we don't really know where we're going. There's a lot of uncertainty, but we're heading in a particular direction. And that will remain more or less similar, but we can't pinpoint a particular end state. So we need to orient continuously. We need to set direction and make that really clear. And then I think we need to create boundaries for people. We almost need to create safety guardrails. So, my hands are doing this. It's almost like we're creating a cone of safety within which we can then empower our people to make decisions. But I think at the moment, if people don't have a sense of where they are, and they don't have a sense of where they're going, and they don't have a sense of where the boundaries are, so where are the boundaries within which we can make decisions, they will get paralyzed, and we will not be able to be resilient and to move at the speed that is required now. I'm not sure if that was 10 minutes.
No, Sonia, I just have a question for you. We've had conversations in this regard. most of people on the screen and the world, and specifically the corporate world, are quite used to be in a place of uncertainty. Uncertainty meaning I doubt, I don't know. And, you know, and we kind of well trained to, what do we do if we don't know what to do? It's kind of where the world was, and where we bring analysts in and we predict and we plan and we strategize. But as I understand with your model, and right now we actually moving into a domain or a place. What do I do when I can't know what to do? Now, in my body, it's very different when I don't know what to do, when I get to the place of I can't know what to do. And as I understand, we're moving now into not a place of uncertainty, but in a place of the unthinkable, unknowable. Can you maybe say something more about that?
Yeah, I think in the past, when we engaged with this idea of uncertainty, it was kind of a limited uncertainty. You know, there was a large domain where it was around, you know, so there are lots of things that we know, and those things are stable, and they're remaining they're remaining stable. And then there are some areas of the unknown that we might choose to explore or not. I think, you know, I would say if you think of Cynefin again, you know, we were operating to a degree in the space of known unknowns or unknown unknowns, you know, and the unknown unknowns were already a little bit uncomfortable for us. I think now we are in this space of unknowable unknowns. I think, you know, if you think of Nassim Taleb and his black swans, I think this is really a place where we are in complete unknown. And even the areas of stability, it's almost like the solid ground we felt we were standing on, that has been eroded. And so this is a different level of unknown. And maybe just to add on to that, there's one of my favorite quotes is by Diego Espinosa. And he said, post the Second World War, we have outsourced our relationship with uncertainty to certainty merchants. And I think one of the things that we really need to resist, especially if we're in a leadership position, is not to allow the system in a way to trick us into becoming certainty merchants for them. At this stage, we can provide direction, we can create safety, and we can contain the uncertainty, but we cannot provide certainty. And I think, you know, even if we look at entire industries that have been built around this notion of being certainty merchants. So I agree with you, uncertainty has always been around, but I think in the past we had the luxury of being able to almost ignore it and to spend our time in places where we had some certainty. And I think that has now more or less disappeared.
Thank you. And I share with clients that if you're not confused in this world right now, you don't know what's going on. It's a Niels Bohr quote about quantum physics. If you're not confused by quantum physics, you don't understand it. If you're not confused, if your people are not confused, highly stressed, well, then you have to phone a doctor because there's something seriously wrong. So it's normalizing that confusion. So thank you, Sonia, from that perspective. But also, I know I've learned from Simon and some people, we also, for this system of Casper, gosh, I need something that I can control. I need to find something that I can control to switch off that nervous system. And we've got William Elliott here on the line as well. William is from Get Things Done, GTD. William, 1 or 2 minutes, just what are the things that we can control? Can you just share with us? And again, you will all get a one-pager with more information from Sonia, from William, and from Simon after this session. William, are you there? Can you just, what can we control?
Casper, I think what we can control is a good question. I think the answers will vary, but in terms of thinking about our next actions, and I know we need to pause and reflect, but we need to combine that with what is the smallest next action I can take in a direction. And if it feels daunting, is it research? Is it to set up a conversation with someone? But nothing happens without action, or very little happens from our side without action. So we really want to, if you feel stuck, break it down into a smaller action that you can take. And in terms of what we've heard about direction, you can't really steer a parked car. It needs to be rolling. Even if it's heading in the wrong direction, it needs to have some sort of movement to be able to turn it around, which we need to sort of join with the paradox of waiting and being still and not just consuming new information all the time, but to pause and let thoughts surface and ideas come from inside, that we're not chasing certainty merchants or fear mongers as well. So in terms of what can I do, I don't know if that's enough. I could say a bit more, but I know we're tight for time.
William, and I think in the feedback form, you will have some practical tips for people about how to do that. Is that correct?
I think we'll send out something just in terms of how you can manage conversations with multiple team members, meetings. I have some ideas for you, something really practical you can do just to channel your thoughts and your directionality into conversations.
Thank you, William. What we in Mindful Leadership also experienced in the last week is this, and also today's session, is so much coming in the head, there's so much thinking, but now in the unthinkable, we can't think ourselves out of the unthinkable. And a lot of thinking is happening, and it's Zoom and virtual sessions and emails. And there's also a lot of action, which is what we know another very wise center in our bodies. We've got the thinking center, we've got the action center. One part that's in the last 3 days is coming to the forefront and maybe give us a key of how we can survive this is the heart center. And I think for the heart center, it's like the epicenter of all our bodies. And I think it's a good time maybe to go to the epicenter of Italy, which is Bergamo. And I can feel I'm getting emotional when I introduce Mauro Veduvello is in the center of Bergamo. One person died every 3 minutes in Italy in the last week. And Mauro is a leadership expert. He's got a company called Nova V. He works with the Enneagram. He's a systems thinker. He's a student of Gurdjieff. Thank you for not working with the university today, but rather to be here with us. Mauro, you're sitting in the epicenter on Bergamo. Come va? Grazie mille per essere qua. Il tempo è la tua. Grazie mille.
Grazie a te, Casper. È difficile. It is hard, actually, here. And thank you for your introduction. And well, Bergamo is actually the epicenter. Not just about Italy itself, but I think, and not just about Europe, but unfortunately about the entire Western world. As we know, Wuhan was a kind of initiator of this outbreak, but still there is no actually link to China to here and why Italy became the second outbreaks and probably the strongest in the Western world. So Bergamo is a small city. It's a medieval city. So we probably have in our system kind of a heritage of remembrance of the death plague, which was here back centuries. And the situation here is kind of, I said, tough, not dramatic, because people are in a way they're quiet. We're handling it. We have seen a dramatic rise of deaths. Just to give you a number, just to give you a picture, we have our local newspaper where there are usually 2 pages about portraying, death of the last 2 days. And these 2 pages, it was also portrayed in the New York Times. We went from 2 pages to 12 pages in a matter of 2 weeks. And it's been raising since there. So the thing is real. You don't get a direct touch when you walk on the streets because the streets are empty. And it's weird. It's weird because Italy, just Bergamo, the whole of Italy is a kind of a very, has a very reluctant attitude to follow rules. We have rules, of course, like, every democracy, but, rules tell this, but I have my opinion and I go this way if I like it. So, and we Italians are kind of this way, but this is actually, the good news is that this pandemic is creating a sort of social collective, which is heartwarming in a way to see how people are reacting and helping each other. And helping actually not just in the country, but also helping to build new hospitals. Bergamo and where I live is actually the epicenter, not just of the outbreak, but also is the economical heart, especially about manufacturing in Italy. So we account the region I'm in, Lombardy, along with Milan, Como, Mantua, and other cities. We account for 80% of taxes in Italy. Just to give you how this is the actually like Bavaria and in Germany, that we are the strongest economical part of the country. So this is very affecting us, not just physically because of the virus, but also economically, psychologically, because of the effect that we won't know what's going to be. So, but it's been, tell me when I'm done with my time. I don't want to go beyond Casper.
No, I'll tell you, and if you can share with us maybe tips, you know, we might end up where you are now with just quiet towns and a lot of people that, you know, what are tips? What can we learn? And in a way also, I said to you yesterday, South African need to say thank you to Italy. People in Italy didn't die for nothing. You were a big warning for us. If it wasn't for all the deaths there, we might have lost many more people in our country. So maybe some tips from you would also be helpful.
Well, definitely to follow rules, not to be skeptic, you know, about maybe you don't see what's going on because you judge about, you know, I see it, I believe it, this is not the way. So you have to really protect yourself, protect your beloved one, which is actually staying, you know, with social distancing. It works when you go out, you do it for immediate reasons and real reasons. Also try not to, you know, order too much online. This is a kind of tip, you know, because also couriers and delivery people are way too busy today to deliver. So just keep your life, you know, and your needs at the minimum if you have the luck to stay home. Stay open also to the social life that what's going on outside. We have many news going on, especially news need to filter about the fact that they tend to emphasize too much what's going on. So maybe you want to get a direct hands-on to the situation, but it's important also to live a social life, which is the one we're living here in this community right now, and also the one you can get from, you know, the outside, your colleagues, and the world outside. So not, you know, this kind of staying far from, you know, the world doesn't mean that we are isolated at home. And quite the contrary. I'm meeting, you know, here about 50 people, new people, which is actually a sign of that's of something emerging right now. So it's very, I'm very hopeful for this to be a momentum that will stay. Because we need more of that social power and more of social love, if we want to call it this way.
So Mauro, you're talking about love there. So are you talking about the heart? We need more open hearts in this context, not necessarily thinking, strategizing. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct. Well, we know that if you want to access your virtues, since you know ancient times, we know that's only one way to do it, and that's the opening of the heart. All virtues come from an opening heart, while our, you know, vices or passions, as they've been known, you know, since the antiquity, they come from the opposite, from a contraction. So when we see fear and we see people, you know, getting stuff or stockpiling. So that's part of, you know, it's a heart contraction. Opening the heart requires first to sit down to get in touch with your body, like we did in the first exercise with Simon. That's the first entry, you know, point. But then from a physical standpoint, the opening of the heart is what actually brings us into our virtues. That's what we really are in terms of human being, and that's how we've been knowing humanity since, the telling of myth, for example, from ancient Greeks. So we know that Homer.
Thank you, Mauro. Thank you. Yeah, grazie mille, and ci sentiamo tra poco. Talking about opening the heart, in the corporate environment, we find most of our clients need to be brave, make decisions. But Gary, I'm putting you on the spot here as Gary Viljoen, the psychotherapist in Cape Town. I suppose people come to you and they have no choice to open heart, and they have to share their big fears. What's the biggest fear or trauma that you see at the moment with individual clients coming in without breaking, obviously, confidentiality?
Thanks, Casper. Yeah, I want to connect with exactly that, the opening of the heart, and also Sonia's notion of normal, which is really the humankind's our desperate need to try and make sense. So one of my observations that I've made recently by seeing people across the board is that I think we are all in the process of being traumatized. This is not a trauma that has happened that we're trying to deal with, or one that is coming. We are in the process of being traumatized. A simple definition of trauma is when you get in more stimuli than you can digest. So getting in more sensory stimulation than can be processed by the system. And the longer that carries on for, the greater the trauma. So like with a car crash or a tsunami, you can imagine that there's just too much information to take in, and the psyche cannot process that. So the defense mechanisms kick in inevitably. This corona pandemic that we're facing is simply, from what I can see, a slow motion car crash. We've got no idea of the velocity we're traveling at, or the terrain we're covering, or just how brutal the impact is going to be at the end of all of this. We don't know whether we'll be bruised or very injured, or whether we are going to be dead. And for most human beings, the stress of not knowing something so critical is just too much to manage. We are in the process of being traumatized. I think this fact, the fact that we don't know, that we so have no idea of where this is going, in addition to the factual information we're getting and the fake news that we're getting, adds up to more stimuli than any human being can process in real time. So I really think that we need to recognize that we're in the process of being traumatized. We're all going to respond in ways that will include our defenses. And some will deny what's going on, some will blame, some will try and seize back control by trying to know everything. Some will be active, some will be passive. The point is that some of these defenses are very useful and some of them are not very useful. But importantly for me is that we all recognize that we are all responding from a slightly more primitive part of ourselves during this time. Can we be compassionate to ourselves, and can we be compassionate to those around us? That's around opening the heart, and that's the one point. The other point that I want to make is that you can be sure that you are in the process that is deeply disturbing and that you will not control in the short term. There's no ways that we can control it. So is there a way that we could possibly learn to walk with this uncertainty? That we can acknowledge the discomfort, to link with Sonia's narrative around normal. There is no normal here. So is there a way that we can possibly realize that discomfort is what's normal, rather than trying to get away from it and fight the feelings? Because I think we'll do more damage that way. We'll create more trauma by trying to get away from the feelings. Oh. So can we fight the virus rather than fight the feelings? And for me, I think a tip would be, can you find just a moment in every day to sit with yourself, as a leader especially, to sit with yourself and reflect on your true feelings about what's going on, to not run from them or fight them, but just acknowledge them. I think that will serve us in a big way.
Thank you, Gary. That's very helpful. And the session we've decided to leave the session open for 15 minutes for those who want to interact after this heartfelt connection. But those who have to go, there's 1 minute before we get to 1 o'clock. So I just want to maybe just say thank you to each one of you for your quality attention. I can see from this perspective how people said that I want to leave you with a saying of the origin of the word courage. Dina, just remind me who's the guy who speaks about this?
I think it's David White.
David White. The origin of the word courage comes from cuore, and cuore in Latin means the heart. And David White says that it's very different than bravery. And this is my wish to all of you as leaders there. Courage means it's the movement on the edge of tears. When you do something courageous, you are moving on the edge of tears. So those calls where you have to fire or have to cut budgets or have to make very tough calls, if you are tearful and emotional about that with an open heart, that means you are being courageous. Bravery is easy. Courage is much more difficult. So my wish from Johannesburg is, may you show courage and may you move at the edge of tears. And may you also have compassion to yourself, because winter is coming and it's not normal. Thank you so much. And we'll send a summary of this with wonderful infographics from James Durno to make sense of this. And hopefully we will see you next week on the same call. Deep, heartfelt thank you to each one of you, wherever you are sitting. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Casper. Thanks, Dina.
Thanks, Casper. Bye.
So I see Nyosi came later. Unfortunately, we missed him earlier in the call.
No, my apologies. My Wi-Fi bombed.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thanks, Casper and Dina.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so some of us will maybe stay on the line, those who can. Those who need to ring off, thank you very much for joining us.
And we'll just leave a moment for people to leave, and then if there are questions or somebody would like to add something, we've got another 15 minutes. Yossi, you might even say something if you don't mind staying online. So Ian, you also can. I know Ian said that he's, I don't know, whatever froze. And I know we've got, so.
And the other option is also just to prioritize Nyosi next time, because I know a number of us were very keen to hear your perspective, Nyosi, especially after your introduction last week. Your perspective is really critical. So I, for one, would really love to hear more, if not today, next week.
Very happy to do so.
Yeah, Casper, sorry, my computer completely froze as you were about to introduce me, so I'm also happy to share if that works.
I think I'll give you a chance next time, Ian, because the people that you had to share work at big corporates and banks, and I think they're all back except maybe Lausanne, back into their other virtual meetings. So, and I also see Ruan. I think Ruan is also somewhere still here. I don't know if Ruan left. Corneille, welcome also to the session. I mean, we have to bring rugby into things. We'll, I don't know, Franco Smith was on here as well, so also welcome to all of you. Maurice, lovely to see you.
So Casper, if there is a moment, could we hear from Nyosi at this stage, if we have a moment?
Please, Nyosi, we are recording this so that we'll go out to people wide. So Nyosi, what is happening? And Nyosi is a serial entrepreneur and knows what's happening on ground level. And I would love to hear, what is your 2 or 3 minutes, what's your latest that you could share with all of us?
Well, look, I apologize that my Wi-Fi dropped. And I just want to agree, especially with Sonia, you know, everything that's happening now is so random. We deal with a lot of entrepreneurs on the ground, everyday people, lower LSM on the economic pyramid. And, you know, people don't believe things that they don't see. And I think that the hangover after this pandemic will be, how do you inculcate call it a new belief system amongst young entrepreneurs, people who feel economically maligned. We know that, and all the people that we deal with now are what we call the street economy. How do you make that street economy part of the global money market? Where you don't have middlemen, possibly you don't even have the banking traditional system that we know it. And how do you secure that money network between individuals, vendors, where people trust the flow of economic benefits? And it just might be that we need call it a digital transformation, something that people so unrelated to what they've known can believe in something newer, greater, and that answers a lot of their callings right now. So that's what we are consumed with that. And it's like everything else, when you enter into a relationship, it's all about trust. The question is, how do we make sure that that trust continues after this pandemic? Because there are going to be repercussions. We don't know what they'll be. So that's in our business, we're consumed with that. And how do we digitize, call it the assets that will open up the floodgate for people who feel maligned to walk back into the economy and not be penalized for whatever behaviors in the past. There's got to be a way that you reintegrate these individuals, and that's what we do.
And I like what you said last time. It's one thing to lock down and get everybody off the system, but how do we get them back on? And also such a hope we can find more time for that conversation. Thank you.
Sure.
Is there anybody else who feels in this smaller circle who would like to share or ask? This is an opportunity for the next 10 minutes, or maybe, just chat. Anybody who would like to share something? Ian, this is recorded, so if you maybe want to speak about the question. I'm not sure if you heard my question.
Yeah, thanks, Casper. I think the challenge we're facing as entrepreneurs is, as Nosi said, we don't really know what's coming until we've experienced it ourselves at some level. So, in my universe, we're invested in multiple businesses, and 3 of them are in tourism. So 2.5 weeks ago, we experienced what I believe is coming for a lot of entrepreneurs. Our turnover went to 0, just like that. As soon as the media started communicating more about what was going on, as soon as the flights from source markets ended, immediately we had no revenue. So we had to act extremely fast to do whatever we could to support our teams and their families to survive what is going to be, in our estimates, a very long winter. Because it's not just about flights starting again, it's about international tourists having the belief that if they get on a plane, they're safe. So there's a fear-based lag for us in tourism that is kind of off the charts in terms of recovery and re-emergence. The tourism industry also employs, I think, 8 to 9%, or contributes 8 to 9% to the GDP of the country. So it really is a full stop, and realistically, it's a 6-month full stop. So we've been super challenged in that. And I guess the piece I wanted to talk about the most is that as a country, we don't have the resources to support the workforce at the level that I believe is needed. So the measures that have been shared are capping out at 6,700 Rand a month per employee. Which if you're a middle-class household used to living off 30 or 40 or whatever the combined number is, it's pretty hard to live off 10. And I know that that's a middle-class problem, but a lot of the entrepreneurs in the 20 mil turnover scheme of things have a lot of employees earning much more than 15 grand a month and have set their lives up. So I've been trying to engage with how do we unset what has been set up for people in terms of the way they live. And for me, that's the banks, it's the landlords, it's SARS coming to the party a lot earlier than letting you off your provisional tax for next August. They need to give back the money we paid them in Feb, because most families are going to run out of cash. I think that's the fundamental premise where we've arrived, is that quite soon, many small businesses are going to fail, and then all the employees and the owners are going to run out of cash. So that sounds very doomsday, I know, but we're already there in tourism, and I hope it's a different outcome. So also to say that, you know, all our thinking has been based on, this is not a short-term 21-day lockdown and then it all goes away. And that may or may not be correct, but we've had to do our thinking based on worst-case scenario.
Thank you.
So those are challenges, you know, I'm sitting with.
Thank you.
You know, my nervous system is quite fried. Thanks, Simon, for that. I'm doing everything I can to unfry it. Yeah, so that's the piece I needed to share.
Thank you, Jan. And I'm also aware, you know, it's to ask people to speak is not always easy. But Maurice, Maurice Barak is one of the people I really respect deeply, specifically her ability to see the bigger picture and like a wise crone. And I know what you offer the world, Maurice, is often slowing down in perspective. Is there anything that you would like to put into this container that might be helpful for our people? And again, this is recorded and it will go out widely.
Great, thank you so much. I think first, it always begins with appreciation, the capacity to appreciate in the hardest circumstances, no matter what, because, you know, when I look at the pictures, I think I appreciate all of you. I certainly appreciate how you put this together. And to not underestimate, I think, because this is my personal experience right now, is to not underestimate what happens when a group of people come together with a sense of focus, of service, and hope, open-heartedness in such an hour. You know, some people may call that floofy, but for me, that has actual impact. And we're learning, or I am certainly learning, to live much more in a way that is less visible externally, because so much of what is visible is being taken away. So yeah, so for me, stepping into gratitude certainly is one way of opening the heart, acknowledging the feelings as they are, giving them names and letting them be what they are so that we can act. So that's been my personal way into
Thank
it.
you so much.
Thanks so much, Casper.
And we've got 4 or 5 minutes left. Simon, I would like to put you on the spot again because there are some emotions I can see. I've got some WhatsApps coming in. Would you be able to maybe help us close the session in a good way, seeing that you started it in such a beautiful way? Whatever way would be, or maybe somebody might want to ask you questions. I don't know, but can I hand it over to you for the next 3 or 4 minutes?
Sure, absolutely. I just want to echo this sentiment of everybody, and there's such a resonance of truth that's reverberating through everybody's sharing and actually through everybody's listening as well. One of the things that comes to mind is a teaching from the Native American tradition where when the children want to go out to play in the forest, they come to the elder to get counsel or to get a tip. You know, what we're going out to play. What do we? What happens if we get lost while we're playing? And the elder looks at them benevolently and says, "Stand still. The trees and the forest around you know where you are." So maybe amidst this movement of thinking, of thoughts and emotions and feelings, and maybe even an acceleration of the felt experience of uncertainty and ambiguity that Sonia was alluding to. What happens if we invite this quality of standing still or sitting still? And that doesn't just mean physically, although of course we're all sitting still, but more inviting in this moment a quality of acknowledging and allowing whatever is being felt in the body and in the heart to simply be as it is. So just taking a few seconds, and if your mind, and the mind of course always wants to know what to do, so give your mind this instruction when it wants to know what to do in this short period of mindfulness practice. The instruction is simply let everything be as it is in this moment. Every feeling that is arising, however subtle, however obvious, however difficult, every sensation, every thought, simply allowing, letting everything be as it is. And how we do that is just to acknowledge what is already here in the body and in the mind. We can breathe gently in and out in the background just to support this quality of being with this moment, rising and passing away into this moment, arising and passing away. Being exactly where we are, with things as they are, is the deepest act of love and the highest benevolence, and the basis for all wise action and all connection. And this is a practice we can have multiple glimpses of in many moments through the day, as and when we remember to.